I stood in my sister's marble-floored kitchen, champagne glass steady in my hand, watching my brother-in-law Marcus tell 47 dinner guests why my career was a joke. The August heat pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, the air conditioning kept everything cool and controlled. Everything except the rage building in my chest. Social work, Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular brand of condescension that wealthy people perfect over generations. Kira actually chose to become a social worker. Can you imagine? 4 years at Northwestern, and she picks the one career guaranteed to keep her poor forever. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Polite laughter, mostly. The kind people offer when someone with money says something moderately funny. My sister Claire stood beside Marcus, her smile frozen in that way I'd learned to recognize over the past 3 years of her marriage. The smile that meant she was uncomfortable, but wouldn't say anything. I mean, we all respect the sacrifice, Marcus continued, warming to his theme now. He'd had 3 glasses of wine already, I'd been counting. But let's be honest, social workers are people who couldn't cut it in real professions. They work with the dregs of society because they couldn't compete in the actual economy. It's basically professional charity work, except the charity is for themselves because they'll never make enough to support a real lifestyle. He gestured around his custom-built home in Lincoln Park, Chicago's most expensive neighborhood. The kitchen alone probably cost more than I'd made in my entire 7-year career. The irony of calling my work charity while standing in a kitchen that could house 3 families wasn't lost on me. Marcus, that's enough, Claire said quietly, but he waved her off. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, honey. Kira's 32 years old, still renting that tiny apartment in Logan Square, driving a car from 2008, shopping at Target like it's Nordstrom. And why? Because she wanted to help people. He made air quotes with his fingers. Well, congratulations, sis. You've helped yourself right into poverty. Sis. He called me sis like we were family, like he had any right to that word. I took a sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles settle on my tongue before swallowing. Every eye in the room had found me at some point during Marcus's speech. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked curious, waiting to see if I'd defend myself, if I'd cry, if I'd make a scene that would give them something to talk about for the next few dinner parties. I did none of those things. You're absolutely right, Marcus, I said, my voice level and pleasant. Social work doesn't pay nearly as much as private equity, but someone has to do the work that actually matters, even if it doesn't come with a custom kitchen. A few people laughed nervously. Marcus's smile tightened. The difference between us, I continued, setting my glass down on the marble counter with a gentle click, is that I chose a profession that helps people. You chose one that helps yourself. I suppose we all have to live with our choices. At least my choices come with financial security, Marcus shot back. How's your retirement fund looking? Oh wait, social workers can't afford retirement? More uncomfortable laughter. Claire touched Marcus's arm, trying to pull him back from whatever edge he was approaching. But he was drunk and confident, and surrounded by people who either worked for him or wanted to impress him. He wasn't going to stop. You know what, Kira? I'm going to do you a favor. My firm is looking for an office manager. $45,000 a year, benefits, normal hours. I'll put in a word for you. Get you out of that depressing work with homeless people and into something respectable. You can thank me later. The room went completely quiet. This was the moment where I was supposed to either accept his charity with grateful tears or storm out in humiliated rage. The moment where Marcus demonstrated his superiority and his generosity in one public gesture. I smiled instead. That's incredibly generous, Marcus, but I'll have to decline. You see, I'm actually quite happy with my career trajectory. In fact, I just accepted a new position. Director of Strategy and Innovation for the entire Midwest region of Common Ground Solutions. It comes with a base salary of $275,000 plus performance bonuses and equity. I start next month. The silence that followed was different now. Confused, disbelieving. Marcus's face went through several expressions: shock, skepticism, calculation. "That's not possible," he said. "You're a caseworker." I was a caseworker. I've also been working on my MBA at night for the past 3 years, doing consulting work on the side, and building relationships with people who actually value expertise in social systems and community development. Turns out, corporations are realizing that understanding how to work with vulnerable populations is actually valuable. Who knew? I picked up my glass again, took another sip, watching Marcus process what I'd just said. His firm made money by buying struggling companies, cutting costs, and flipping them for profit. My new employer made money by helping those same companies build sustainable community relationships and avoid the PR disasters that came from treating people like spreadsheet items. Common Ground Solutions, I continued, has been hiring me as a consultant for 2 years. They finally offered me a full-time executive role 3 months ago. I've just been waiting for the right moment to announce it. 3 months, Claire said. You've known for 3 months and didn't tell me? I wanted to wait until everything was finalized. And honestly, Claire, I wanted to see how long Marcus would keep making jokes about my poverty before I dropped this particular bomb. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of Marcus's colleagues and friends and business partners. For anyone interested, Common Ground is hiring. We pay competitively, and we actually do meaningful work. Though I suppose that's less appealing when you're already comfortable. I set my glass down and pulled my keys from my purse. Thank you for the lovely dinner, Claire. The salmon was perfect. Marcus, thanks for the job offer, but I'm afraid I'm overqualified. I'll see myself out. I walked through that kitchen, through the marble foyer, out the heavy front door, and didn't look back. My hands didn't start shaking until I was in my car, 2 blocks away, safely hidden in the evening darkness. But I was smiling. Because Marcus didn't know the half of it. He didn't know that Common Ground Solutions had been specifically targeting his firm's client list for the past year. He didn't know that I'd been the one feeding them information about his company's practices. Information that was completely legal to share, but devastatingly effective. He didn't know that 3 of his biggest clients were planning to announce next week that they were switching to Common Ground services. He didn't know that the job offer I'd just accepted came with the specific assignment of dismantling everything he built in the Midwest market. And he definitely didn't know that I'd been planning this moment for exactly 8 months. Ever since I'd first heard him mock my career at last year's Christmas dinner. Ever since I'd decided that I was done being the family charity case. The revenge wasn't in the announcement. That was just the opening shot. The real revenge was going to unfold over the next 6 months, as I systematically proved that my joke career had given me more power in this industry than his Ivy League education and trust fund ever could. But he'd figure that out soon enough. The night of Claire's dinner party, I drove home to my tiny apartment in Logan Square that Marcus had mocked so thoroughly. It was tiny. A 1-bedroom, 650 square feet. 3rd floor walk-up in a building that had been converted from a factory in the 1990s. The walls were exposed brick. The floors were original hardwood that creaked in all the right places. And the rent was frozen at $975 a month because my landlord was a former client who'd never forgotten that I'd helped him find housing after he'd lost everything in the 2008 crash. Marcus saw poverty. I saw strategy. The apartment had been temporary when I'd moved in 7 years ago, fresh out of grad school, drowning in student loans, determined to prove I could make it as a social worker in one of America's most expensive cities. It had stayed temporary for 3 years while I paid down debt and built up savings. And then it had become strategic when I'd realized that living below my means was how I'd build the capital to execute the plan that was now coming to fruition. I poured myself a glass of wine. Not expensive wine, but decent wine. The kind that said I had taste, but not pretension. And opened my laptop. 43 new emails since I'd left for dinner 3 hours ago. 18 of them were from colleagues at Common Ground, discussing the client transition strategy we'd been planning for months. The biggest email was from Helena Park, Common Ground's CEO and the woman who'd taken a chance on hiring me as a consultant 2 years ago. Kira, I heard through the grapevine that you made your big announcement tonight. How did it go? Please tell me you got to see Marcus's face when you dropped the salary bomb. I've been dying for that moment since you told me about his comments last year. Let's talk tomorrow about the transition timeline. We're ready to move as soon as you are. I smiled and typed back. His face was everything I'd hoped for. We're on schedule. First client announcement goes public Monday. I'll be ready. What I hadn't told anyone, not even Helena, was exactly how much I knew about Marcus's business practices. How much I'd learned from Claire over the past 3 years, during the sister lunches where she'd complained about his work stress, the dinners where he'd taken phone calls at the table, the holidays where he'd disappeared into his study to handle emergencies. Claire didn't know she was feeding me intelligence. She thought she was just venting to her sister about her demanding husband. But I'd been listening carefully, remembering details, building a mental map of Marcus's company that had proven invaluable when Common Ground started courting his clients. I wasn't proud of using my sister that way, but I also wasn't apologizing for it. 8 months ago, I'd been sitting in Claire's kitchen, that same marble kitchen, helping her prep for a Christmas party, when Marcus had walked in with 2 of his colleagues. They hadn't noticed me standing at the counter, chopping vegetables, apparently invisible in the way that service workers often are. The problem with these activist groups, Marcus had said to his colleagues, is they don't understand how business actually works. They think you can run a company by being nice to everyone. They don't get that sometimes you have to make hard choices. Cut the dead weight, maximize efficiency, like that Chicago Heights project. One colleague had asked, exactly. We came in, identified the problems, overstaffed, too many community programs, too much overhead. Cut 40% of the workforce, eliminated the... Our job is to make money for investors, not to babysit the locals. The Chicago Heights project. I'd known people who'd lost their jobs in that purge. Good people, dedicated people, who'd been working to revitalize a struggling neighborhood, who'd been building after-school programs and job training initiatives and community gardens, all of it eliminated in Marcus's quest for efficiency. Your sister-in-law is one of those bleeding hearts, isn't she? The other colleague had said, laughing. Bet she loves what you're doing. Kira, please. She barely makes minimum wage helping homeless people fill out forms. She has no idea how real business works. She's basically a professional volunteer. They'd laughed and moved on to other topics. I'd stood there with the knife in my hand, cutting vegetables with precise, controlled movements, and made a decision. I would show Marcus exactly how real business worked. I'd started by doing what I did best, research. I'd dug into Marcus's firm, learning everything I could about their strategies, their clients, their reputation in the business community. I'd discovered something interesting. While Marcus's firm was profitable, it was also starting to develop a reputation problem. Several high-profile clients had left after PR disasters linked to the aggressive cost-cutting Marcus specialized in. That's when I'd remembered Helena Park. Helena and I had met 3 years earlier at a nonprofit conference. She'd been a keynote speaker, talking about her then-new company, Common Ground Solutions. The concept had been revolutionary. Consulting services that helped corporations develop sustainable community engagement strategies. Instead of treating vulnerable populations as obstacles to profit, Common Ground showed companies how to work with communities to build long-term success. Corporate America is finally realizing, Helena had said in her speech, that treating people badly is bad for business. But most executives don't know how to do it differently. They've been trained to see communities as problems to solve, not partners to engage with. That's where we come in. After the conference, I'd approached Helena and asked if she needed consultants with actual social work experience. She'd hired me on the spot. For 2 years, I'd worked part-time, nights and weekends around my casework, helping Common Ground develop strategies for working with vulnerable populations. I'd been good at it. Better than good. I understood things that Harvard MBAs didn't understand. How trauma affects decision-making. How poverty creates barriers that spreadsheets can't capture. How communities organize and resist and survive. That knowledge had been invaluable to Common Ground's clients, and gradually, Helena had been giving me more responsibility, more autonomy, more opportunities to prove that my joke career had taught me things that actually mattered in the business world. And then, 8 months ago, listening to Marcus mock my work in Claire's kitchen, I'd seen the opportunity. I'd gone to Helena with a proposal. Marcus's firm was hemorrhaging clients because of their reputation for aggressive cost-cutting that destroyed communities. Common Ground could target those clients, offer them a different approach, and rebuild what Marcus had damaged. It would be good for business, good for communities, and good for my career. I'd carefully avoided mentioning that it would also be devastating for Marcus personally. Helena had loved the idea. You're talking about basically building a market vertical around cleaning up after firms like Marcus's, she'd said. That's brilliant, and you have the expertise to make it work. But Kira, if we do this, I want you running it. Not as a consultant, as a full-time executive, director level, with equity and bonuses tied to performance. What do you say? I'd said yes, obviously, but I'd asked for 3 things. Time to finish my MBA, time to lay the groundwork with potential clients, and most importantly, time to choose exactly when and how I'd announce my new position to Marcus. You want to make an entrance, Helena had said, understanding immediately. I want to make a point. Now, 8 months later, sitting in my tiny apartment with my decent wine, I pulled up the file I'd been building for months. It was labeled Project Accountability in my Documents folder because I'd learned a long time ago that calling something what it really was, revenge, made you feel guilty about it. Inside the file were detailed profiles of 12 companies that currently used Marcus's firm for consulting services. I'd spent months researching each one, understanding their challenges, identifying where Marcus's cost-cutting approach had created problems, developing alternative strategies that Common Ground could offer. 3 of those 12 companies were already committed to switching to Common Ground. Announcements would go public on Monday. 4 more were in serious discussions. The remaining 5 were long-term targets. If everything went according to plan, Marcus's firm would lose 40 to 60% of their Midwest revenue within 6 months. They'd survive. He worked for a large firm with operations across the country. But Marcus personally would be devastated. He'd lose clients he'd spent years cultivating. His reputation would take a hit. His bonuses would disappear. And most importantly, he'd have to explain to his partners why a former social worker was systematically dismantling his client base. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. We need to talk. Tomorrow? Lunch? I stared at that message for a long time. Claire was my sister, my only sibling, my closest family since our parents had died 5 years ago in a car accident. We'd been through everything together. Childhood, college, our parents' death, her whirlwind romance with Marcus. She was the person who'd held me when I'd cried about my student loans, who'd celebrated when I'd graduated with my MSW, who'd supported every choice I'd made. She was also married to the man I was about to professionally destroy. I typed back, "Coffee at Aldo's, 10 a.m., see you there." Then I closed my laptop, finished my wine, and went to bed. I needed to be sharp for tomorrow. Claire was going to ask questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. But ready or not, the plan was in motion. Marcus had spent years thinking of me as the poor, well-meaning sister-in-law who'd made unfortunate career choices. He was about to learn that the only unfortunate choice had been his, underestimating someone who'd spent 7 years learning exactly how to help people who'd been underestimated their entire lives. I'd been trained to see potential where others saw problems, to find solutions where others saw obstacles, to fight for people when everyone else had given up. Marcus had never understood that those skills applied to more than just casework. Tomorrow, I'd start teaching him that lesson. Aldo's Coffee was a small cafe in Wicker Park, halfway between Claire's Lincoln Park mansion and my Logan Square apartment. I'd chosen it deliberately neutral territory, familiar to both of us, comfortable enough for difficult conversations. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed our usual table in the back corner. Claire showed up exactly on time, which was unusual. She was generally 10 to 15 minutes late, a habit she'd developed since marrying Marcus, as if his wealth had bought her the privilege of making other people wait. She looked tired. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, expensive jewelry, but tired underneath it all. The kind of tired that came from maintaining appearances. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. She ordered a latte without looking at the menu. The same drink she'd been ordering since we were teenagers. "Of course, you're my sister." "Am I?" The question came out sharp, more bitter than she'd probably intended. She softened immediately. "Sorry, that came out wrong. Kira, what the hell was last night?" "Last night was your husband publicly mocking my career for the entertainment of his friends. What did you think it was? You embarrassed him. He embarrassed himself. I just corrected some misunderstandings about my financial situation. For 3 months, you've been hiding this new job from me. 3 months, Kira. Why wouldn't you tell me?" I sipped my coffee, black, no sugar, the same way I'd been drinking it since college, when I couldn't afford the fancy drinks Claire ordered. "Would you have kept it quiet if I'd told you?" She started to answer, then stopped. We both knew the truth. Claire told Marcus everything. Not because he demanded it, but because somewhere in the past 3 years of marriage, she'd become the kind of wife who didn't keep secrets from her husband. "I wanted to wait until it was official," I said, which was only partially true. "And I wanted to announce it on my own terms, not have Marcus find out through you and figure out some way to undermine it." He wouldn't, Claire. He offered me a job as an office manager in front of 47 people. An office manager. He saw my 7 years of experience, my graduate degree, my expertise, and thought, "I know, I'll offer her an entry-level administrative position." That's not generosity. That's condescension. He was trying to help you. He was trying to prove he was superior to me. There's a difference. Claire's latte arrived. She wrapped her hands around the mug like she was cold, even though it was August and the cafe was warm. "You're right," she said quietly. "He was being an ass. He's been difficult lately, work stress. Some clients are leaving, and he's taking it out on everyone." 3 clients are leaving, I said. Announced Monday. They're switching to my company. Claire's head snapped up. "What?" Common Ground Solutions has been courting Marcus's clients for months. 3 of them are announcing the switch Monday. 4 more are in serious discussions. We're systematically targeting his firm's Midwest operation. You're involved in this? I'm leading it. That's my new job, Claire. Director of Strategy and Innovation, specifically focused on winning over clients who are dissatisfied with firms like Marcus's. Firms like Marcus's? You mean Marcus's firm specifically? Yes. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Claire stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she'd only ever seen the version of me that needed her help, her protection, her charity. The little sister who'd made unfortunate choices and needed looking after. "You're trying to destroy his career," she said finally. "I'm doing my job. If his clients are unsatisfied with his services and prefer mine, that's not destruction. That's competition. Don't play semantic games with me, Kira. You're going after him specifically because of last night, because he made some stupid comments. Last night was just the latest in 3 years of stupid comments, Claire. 3 years of him treating me like a failure at every family event. 3 years of him explaining to anyone who'd listen that I'd wasted my education. 3 years of you standing next to him and saying nothing while he humiliated me. That's not fair. I've defended you, quietly, to him, in private, where it didn't cost you anything. But last night, in front of all those people, when he was really laying into me, you said, "Marcus, that's enough." And then you shut up when he ignored you. Because standing up to him publicly would have been embarrassing for you. Claire's eyes filled with tears. He's my husband, and I'm your sister. We're supposed to be blood, but somewhere in the past 3 years, you decided his approval was more important than my dignity. I didn't. She stopped, wiped her eyes, tried again. I didn't realize you felt that way. I've been telling you for 3 years that his comments hurt. You always said he didn't mean anything by it, that he was just joking, that I was being too sensitive. You chose to hear what was comfortable instead of what was true. So this is revenge? You're destroying his career because your feelings got hurt. I'm building my career, Claire. If that coincidentally hurts his career, that's called consequence, not revenge. You know he's going to lose his job if you take too many of his clients. His firm is already unhappy with the defections. If you take more, they'll fire him. Then maybe he should have built better client relationships. Maybe he should have treated communities better. Maybe he should have been less focused on short-term profits and more focused on sustainable success. You sound like you hate him. I thought about that. Did I hate Marcus? I'd spent months asking myself that question. Hate was such a strong word, such an intense emotion. It seemed too big for what I actually felt, which was more like disgust, disappointment, a cold determination to prove him wrong. I don't hate him, I said finally. I just don't respect him, and I'm tired of pretending I do. He's family. No, you're family. He's someone you married. There's a difference. Claire flinched like I'd slapped her. Maybe I had, emotionally, but I was tired of soft-pedaling the truth to make her comfortable. What do you want me to say, Kira? That I'm proud of you? That I support you going after my husband's career? Because I can't do that. I can't choose between you. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to understand why I'm doing this. And I'm telling you that I'm not stopping. Common Ground has invested too much in this strategy, and I've worked too hard to get here. If Marcus ends up collateral damage in my career success, that's something you're going to have to live with. And our relationship? What happens to that? I don't know, Claire. That's up to you. You can accept that I'm finally succeeding in my career and be happy for me. Or you can blame me for the consequences of Marcus's own behavior. But I'm not apologizing for being good at my job. She stood up, leaving her latte mostly untouched on the table. I need time to think about this. About everything. I'll call you. Claire, I love you, Kira. But I also love my husband. And I don't know how to reconcile what you're doing with both of those things. So I need time. She left. I sat there alone at our usual table, finishing my coffee, watching the street outside the cafe window. People walked by with their dogs, their children, their own concerns. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the small drama playing out in this corner cafe. I'd known this conversation was coming. I'd prepared for it, rehearsed my answers, built my arguments. But I hadn't prepared for how it would feel to watch Claire walk away, to see her choose Marcus over me, even while claiming she couldn't choose. My phone buzzed. A text from Helena. Press release approved. Announcements go live Monday, 8 a.m. 3 clients officially switching to Common Ground. Are you ready for the fallout? I typed back, as ready as I'll ever be. The truth was, I wasn't ready at all. I was prepared professionally, but emotionally, I just lost my sister, or at least damaged our relationship badly enough that I wasn't sure it could be repaired. Was my career really worth that cost? Then I remembered standing in Claire's kitchen 8 months ago, invisible, while Marcus and his colleagues laughed about the Chicago Heights project. Remembered the 40 people who'd lost their jobs, the community programs that had been eliminated, the neighborhoods that had been damaged in the name of efficiency. Remembered Marcus last night, mocking my poverty in front of 47 people, while Claire stood beside him and smiled her frozen smile. Yeah, it was worth it. I finished my coffee, left money on the table, enough for both drinks, because I'd been trained to always pay my fair share, and walked out into the August heat. My phone was already filling with emails. Work to do, strategies to finalize, clients to transition. The real battle was just beginning. And unlike Claire, I'd chosen my side a long time ago. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that only came after a storm. The weekend had been quiet. No calls from Claire, no texts from Marcus, nothing but work emails and strategic planning documents. I'd spent Saturday at Common Ground's downtown office, going over the transition plans with my new team. 12 people reported to me now, a mix of social workers, community organizers, and business consultants who'd all chosen to work at Common Ground because they believed corporate success and community health weren't mutually exclusive. The first client announcement goes live at 8 a.m. Helena had explained to the team. Midwest Manufacturing Solutions is switching from Hammond Consulting, that's Marcus's firm, to Common Ground. They're a mid-size manufacturer in Gary, Indiana, that Hammond has been working with for 4 years. Under Hammond's guidance, they've cut their workforce by 30% and eliminated all their community engagement programs. And their reputation in Gary is terrible. They can't hire locally anymore, can't source materials locally. They've saved money on labor, but lost everything that made them valuable to the community. And we're going to fix that? One of my consultants had asked. We're going to try, I'd said. They're paying us $300,000 over the next year to rebuild community relationships, develop a local hiring pipeline, and create sustainable supply chains. If we succeed, they become profitable, and the community benefits. Everyone wins. Except Hammond Consulting, someone had pointed out. Except Hammond Consulting, I'd agreed. Now, Monday morning at 7:45, I sat at my new desk in my new office with my new title on the door, watching the clock tick toward 8 a.m. My office wasn't huge. Common Ground believed in open floor plans and collaborative spaces, but it had a window, a door that closed, and a nameplate that read, Kira Thompson, Director of Strategy and Innovation. Thompson was my maiden name. I'd never changed it when Claire had gotten married, though everyone just assumed I was also an Ashford now, through some kind of associative property. But I'd kept Thompson deliberately, a small act of maintaining my own identity. My phone buzzed at exactly 8 a.m. Helena's text. It's live. Midwest Manufacturing Solutions press release is out. Here we go. I pulled up my email and found the press release waiting. Professional, straightforward, emphasizing Midwest Manufacturing's commitment to community engagement and sustainable growth. It mentioned that they'd previously worked with Hammond Consulting, but were now transitioning to Common Ground Solutions for more comprehensive community-focused strategies. It didn't mention Marcus by name. Didn't need to. Everyone in the industry would know exactly what this meant. My phone started ringing at 8:07. Private number. I debated not answering, but curiosity won. Kira Thompson. You fucking bitch. Marcus. His voice was cold and furious, nothing like the condescending tone from Friday night. This was a different Marcus, the one who showed up when someone threatened his money. Good morning, Marcus. I assume you saw the press release. You know damn well I saw it. You stole my client. Actually, Common Ground won a client who was unsatisfied with Hammond Consulting services. That's called business competition. You should try it sometime. Don't play cute with me. This is about Friday night. You're going after my clients because I hurt your feelings. I'm doing my job. if your clients prefer our services to yours, that's a reflection of your performance, not my vindictiveness. My performance? I've been working with Midwest Manufacturing for 4 years. I saved them millions in labor costs and destroyed their reputation in the community. They can't hire locally anymore, Marcus. Every qualified worker in Gary knows they laid off 30% of their workforce and then brought in cheaper labor from outside the area. That's not sustainable. That's not even smart. It's profitable. That's what matters. In the short term, sure, but long term, they're losing market share to competitors who have better community relationships. They're spending more on recruitment because no one local will work for them. They're dealing with PR problems that are costing them contracts. You optimized for the wrong metrics, and now they're paying for it. So you swoop in with your bleeding heart social worker and convince them that feelings matter more than profits? That's not how business works, Kira. It's exactly how business works. Or at least it's how business should work if companies want to survive more than 5 years. But you wouldn't know that, because you've never stayed with a client long enough to see the long-term consequences of your advice. I've seen plenty of consequences, profitable consequences, for you, not for the companies, not for the communities, just for you and your firm's bottom line. That's what I'm paid to do. And now you're being replaced by someone who does it better. How does that feel, Marcus? Being replaced by someone you thought was beneath you? He was quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing. That controlled breathing people do when they're trying not to explode. This isn't over, he said finally. You're right, it's not. Because Midwest Manufacturing is just the first announcement. There are 2 more coming today, and several more in the pipeline. By the time I'm done, you won't have a Midwest client base to manage. I'll destroy you. I'll call every contact I have and make sure no one works with common ground. You'll do nothing, Marcus, because if you start interfering with my business relationships, that's tortious interference, and I'll sue you personally. And unlike you, I actually know what I'm talking about because I spent the weekend reviewing the relevant case law with Common Ground's attorneys. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I have. Do you know why? Because you taught me to. 3 years of watching you operate taught me exactly how to compete in this industry. Every dinner party where you talked about your strategies, every family event where you complained about difficult clients, every conversation where you dismissed my career while explaining yours, I was listening, learning, building a map of how you operate so I'd know exactly where you were vulnerable. So this is about revenge. This is about competition. You wanted me in business? Congratulations. Here I am, and I'm better at it than you are. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly. That conversation had been more intense than I'd planned, more personal. I'd let my anger show more than I should have, given away more of my motivation than was strategic. But it had also felt good, really good, to finally tell Marcus exactly what I thought of him and his business practices, to hear the shock in his voice when he realized I'd been planning this, to know that he was currently sitting in his expensive office, surrounded by his expensive things, contemplating the fact that his poor sister-in-law had just stolen his client. My phone rang again, Claire this time. Did you really just steal Marcus's client? I won a client that was unhappy with Hammond Consulting Services. Yes, Kira, he's furious. He just called me ranting about lawsuits and revenge. What did you say to him? The truth. That I'm good at my job. That his clients prefer my approach. And that he should have thought about consequences before spending 3 years mocking my career. This isn't professional competition anymore. This is personal. It's been personal since he started treating me like a charity case. I'm just finally fighting back. He's my husband, and I'm your sister, which apparently doesn't mean as much as it used to. Claire was quiet for a long moment. I could hear voices in the background. Marcus, probably, still ranting about something. I need to go, she said finally. But Kira, please, whatever you're planning, whatever else you're doing, think about what this is doing to our family, to us. Because I don't know how to fix this if you destroy his career. Then I guess we'll find out how much family really means, won't we? I hung up before she could respond. Another bridge potentially burned, another relationship damaged. The cost of revenge was adding up faster than I'd anticipated, but the press releases were still coming. At 9 a.m., the second announcement went live, a retail chain switching from Hammond to Common Ground. At 10 a.m., the third, a healthcare provider looking to rebuild community trust after a disastrous round of layoffs that Hammond had recommended. By noon, my inbox was flooded. Other potential clients reaching out, curious about Common Ground services. Reporters asking for interviews about our community-focused approach. Industry analysts wanting to understand this shift in consulting philosophy. And one email that stopped me cold. From someone at Hammond Consulting, someone who wasn't Marcus. Ms. Thompson, my name is Victoria Crane. I'm a partner at Hammond Consulting. I'd like to meet with you to discuss your recent client acquisitions. I believe we may have some common interests. Would you be available for coffee this week? Regards, Victoria. I stared at that email for a full minute. Victoria Crane was one of Hammond's senior partners, someone Marcus had mentioned occasionally as his mentor within the firm. Why would she want to meet with me? Was this an attempt at intimidation? An offer to negotiate? Or something else entirely? I forwarded the email to Helena with a question mark in the subject line. She called me immediately. This is interesting, Helena said. Victoria Crane doesn't reach out to competitors unless she's plotting something. What do you think she wants? No idea. Should I meet with her? Absolutely. But bring me with you. I want to hear what Hammond's senior leadership has to say about your little client liberation project. We scheduled the meeting for Wednesday afternoon at a neutral location, a hotel bar downtown, public enough to be safe, but private enough for sensitive conversations. I spent Tuesday preparing, gaming out scenarios, trying to anticipate what Victoria might want. Marcus called twice more on Tuesday. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that grew progressively angrier, accusing me of everything from corporate espionage to deliberately sabotaging his marriage. I saved them all, just in case his threats escalated into something actionable. Claire texted once, "Please call me. We need to talk about this before it gets worse." I didn't respond. What was there to say? I told her my position. She'd chosen Marcus's side. The conversation was over until she decided it wasn't. Tuesday night, I stayed late at the office, reviewing client files and transition plans. The 3 clients we'd officially announced were moving forward smoothly. The 4 in serious discussions were asking good questions, taking our proposals seriously. And the remaining 5 on my target list were starting to show interest, reaching out for preliminary meetings. My plan was working better than I dared to hope. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. I answered cautiously. "Is this Kira Thompson?" A woman's voice, professional, but warm. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Sofia Hernandez. I'm a social worker at the Chicago Department of Family Services. I got your name from a former client of yours, Michael Rodriguez. He said you helped him get back on his feet about 5 years ago." Michael Rodriguez. I remembered him. A veteran who'd lost his housing after a series of unfortunate circumstances. I'd worked with him for 8 months, helping him navigate the VA system, find stable housing, connect with mental health services. Last I'd heard, he was doing well, working steady, volunteering at a veteran center. I remember Michael. How is he? He's great, actually, working as a peer counselor now at the same veteran center where you connected him with services. He talks about you all the time. Says you saved his life. I just did my job. That's what he said you'd say. Anyway, the reason I'm calling, I saw your announcement about the new position at Common Ground, and I have an idea I wanted to run by you. Would you have time to meet? What kind of idea? The kind that might help a lot of people like Michaelin. The kind that might change how corporations think about social responsibility. But I'd rather explain it in person if you have time. I was intrigued despite my exhaustion. Coffee tomorrow morning? Before my meeting with Victoria Crane? Perfect. There's a cafe called Lucia's near the Federal Building. 8 a.m.? I'll be there. After we hung up, I sat in my empty office, looking out at the Chicago skyline lit up against the night sky. 24 hours ago, I'd been preparing for the first press release, nervous about how it would be received. Now I had 3 new clients, another 4 in serious talks, interest from dozens more, and mysterious meetings with both a senior partner at my enemy's firm and a social worker with an intriguing proposal. The revenge I'd been planning for 8 months was unfolding faster than I'd expected. And I was starting to realize that it was bigger than just Marcus, bigger than just proving him wrong, bigger than just winning a few clients. I was actually building something that mattered, something that could change how corporations operated, how they treated communities, how they thought about success. Marcus had been so focused on mocking my career that he'd never stopped to think about what I'd learned in 7 years of social work. I'd learned how systems worked, how power operated, how to find leverage where others saw helplessness, how to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. I'd just never applied those lessons to business competition before. Now that I was, it turned out I was pretty good at it. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but I work at Hammond. Marcus is losing it. Partners are questioning him. Keep doing what you're doing. Someone needed to knock him down a few pegs. Good luck." I saved that message, filed it away with all the other evidence I was collecting, and finally went home. Tomorrow would bring more complications, more confrontations, more consequences of the plan I'd set in motion. But tonight, alone in my tiny apartment with my decent wine, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Marcus had called me a professional volunteer, had said I'd helped myself into poverty, had offered me a job as an office manager because he thought that was the best I could do. He was about to learn that the only mistake had been his, underestimating someone who'd spent 7 years learning how to fight for people everyone else had written off, including myself. Wednesday morning, I met Sofia Hernandez at Lucia's Cafe at 8 a.m. sharp. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 20s, with the kind of energy that suggested she was either brand new to social work or hadn't yet been beaten down by the system. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, ordering an elaborate coffee drink that would have cost me a day's food budget when I'd been starting out. "I know you're busy with your new position. I'm curious. You said you had an idea?" "Right. Okay, so here's the thing. I've been a caseworker for 3 years, and I keep running into the same problem. My clients, mostly low-income families, people experiencing homelessness, folks with criminal records trying to rebuild, they can't get jobs. Not because they're not qualified, not because they're not willing to work, but because corporations won't hire them. They fail background checks, or they don't have stable addresses, or they don't have references, or they just don't know how to interview for corporate positions. This is a known problem in social services. What's your solution? Partner with corporations who are willing to take a chance on vulnerable populations. Create supported employment programs where we provide ongoing case management, help with transportation and childcare, support during the adjustment period. Make it so corporations aren't taking on all the risk alone. And you think Common Ground should facilitate this? I think you already are, in a way. You're helping corporations build community relationships. Employment is the most direct relationship there is. If you can convince companies to hire from vulnerable populations with proper support systems in place, everybody wins. Companies get employees who are incredibly loyal and motivated. Communities get jobs and economic stability. And we social workers get to see our clients actually succeed instead of cycling through the system forever. I sipped my coffee, thinking. It was a good idea. A really good idea, actually. and it aligned perfectly with Common Ground's mission of helping corporations build sustainable community relationships. How many clients could you realistically support? Personally, maybe 20 at a time if I had some administrative help. But if this became a program, if we recruited other caseworkers, if we built the infrastructure, hundreds eventually. And you want Common Ground to fund this? I want Common Ground to sell it to their corporate clients. Make it a service offering. We'll help you build community relationships through strategic hiring from vulnerable populations, with full support services included. Companies pay for the service. We get funded to do the work. Clients get jobs. Everyone wins except traditional consulting firms who just tell companies to cut costs and optimize efficiency. Exactly. Sophia grinned. I heard what you did to Hammond Consulting, taking their clients by offering a better approach to community engagement. This is the same thing, just more direct. And I thought, who better to pitch this to than someone who understands both the social work side and the business side? I looked at this eager, energetic young social worker and saw myself 7 years ago, idealistic, determined to change the system, convinced that the right approach could solve everything. I'd learned a lot since then, including the fact that idealism without strategy was just wishful thinking. But idealism with strategy? That could actually change things. I'll bring it to my team, I said. No promises, but I like the concept. Can you put together a formal proposal? Include data on employment outcomes, cost-benefit analysis, potential barriers, and how you'd address them. Give me something I can take to our CEO. Really? Sophia's eyes lit up. You'll actually consider this? I'll consider it. But Sophia, fair warning, if Common Ground does this, it's going to be a business service, not a charity project. We'll need to charge enough to make it sustainable. We'll need to prove ROI to corporate clients. We'll need metrics and outcomes and all the things that make idealistic social workers uncomfortable. I can live with that. As long as people get jobs and support. I don't care if it's profitable for Common Ground too. We talked for another 30 minutes about logistics and possibilities. By the time we finished, I had a page full of notes, and Sophia had a deadline of 2 weeks to submit a formal proposal. You know, Sophia said as we were leaving, Michael talks about you like you're some kind of social work legend. He says you never gave up on people, even when the system told you to. That's why he gave me your name when I was trying to figure out who to approach with this idea. He said if anyone could make it work, it would be you. Michael gives me too much credit. I just did my job. That's what legends always say. After Sophia left, I sat in my car for a few minutes, processing. 8 months ago, I'd been a caseworker, feeling stuck and undervalued. Now I was a director with 12 employees, 3 new clients, and social workers reaching out to me with innovative proposals that could actually change people's lives. Marcus had mocked my career. What he'd failed to understand was that my career had given me something his never would. A network of people who'd seen me at my best, who trusted me, who believed in what I could do. That network was turning out to be more valuable than any Ivy League connections Marcus had cultivated. At 1 p.m., I met Helena at the hotel bar for our meeting with Victoria Crane. Helena was wearing her power suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, expensive but not ostentatious. She'd built Common Ground from nothing 8 years ago, and she knew how to project confidence without arrogance. Remember, Helena said as we waited, we're listening more than talking. Victoria reached out to us. That means she wants something. Let's find out what before we commit to anything. Victoria Crane arrived at 1:15, late enough to establish that she didn't wait for anyone, but not so late as to be rude. She was in her 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and the kind of presence that came from decades of being the smartest person in every room. Helena, thank you for meeting me, Victoria said, shaking hands with practiced professionalism. And Kira, it's a pleasure to finally meet the woman who's been causing such chaos in my firm. Chaos is a strong word, I said. I prefer strategic disruption. Victoria laughed. I like you already. Let's sit. We claimed a corner table, ordered drinks, whiskey for Victoria, wine for Helena, water for me because I wanted to stay sharp, and settled into the careful dance of corporate negotiation. I'll get straight to the point, Victoria said. Hammond Consulting has a Marcus problem. Helena and I exchanged glances. This was not what we'd expected. Go on, Helena said carefully. Marcus is talented in some ways. He's good at numbers, good at efficiency, good at making short-term profits appear. But he's terrible at relationships. He burns through clients like firewood, extracting maximum value and then moving on before the consequences catch up. For years. That's been fine because there was always another client desperate enough to try Hammond's approach. But the market is changing. Companies are realizing that short-term optimization at the expense of long-term sustainability is bad business. They're looking for a different approach. An approach like common ground offers, I said. Exactly. And Marcus has been slow to adapt. He still thinks the old ways work, that communities are obstacles to profit rather than assets. He's been resistant to every suggestion that we need to evolve our methods. Victoria sipped her whiskey. The partners have been patient. But losing 3 clients in one day? To a competitor offering exactly what we should have been offering all along? That's no longer a Marcus problem. That's a firm problem. So you want us to stop targeting your clients, Helena said. No, I want you to keep targeting them. I want you to take every single client Marcus has been mismanaging. I want you to make it so obvious that his approach is outdated that the partners have no choice but to remove him from his position. I couldn't hide my surprise. You want us to help you get rid of Marcus? I want you to continue doing what you're doing, which will naturally result in Marcus being reassigned or encouraged to leave. And in exchange, I'm offering you something valuable. What? Helena asked. Information. I know which of Hammond's clients are unhappy. I know which ones are already considering switching. I know where Marcus is vulnerable and where he thinks he's strong. I can give you a roadmap for dismantling his client base. All I ask in return is that when the dust settles, when Marcus is gone and Hammond needs to rebuild its Midwest operation, you remember that not everyone at Hammond was like him. Some of us have been trying to change the firm's approach for years. You want to work with us, I said, understanding. After we destroy Marcus's career, you want Hammond and Common Ground to partner on a new approach. I want Hammond to survive Marcus's inevitable implosion by positioning ourselves as having learned from our mistakes. Partnering with Common Ground would signal that change. It would be good for both our companies. Helena leaned back, studying Victoria carefully. This is remarkably Machiavellian. This is business. Marcus has been holding Hammond back for years. You've simply provided the catalyst for his removal. I'm just making sure that when he falls, he doesn't take the entire firm with him. And if I refuse? I asked. If I say I'm not interested in being a tool for internal Hammond politics, then you continue doing what you're doing anyway, and Marcus still loses his clients and his position. You just don't get the advantage of inside information. And Hammond probably struggles more than necessary in rebuilding because we won't have the goodwill of having helped you. She was right. We didn't need her help to continue winning clients. But having insider information would accelerate the process. We could target exactly the clients most likely to switch, avoid wasting resources on those who wouldn't. I need to think about this, Helena said. This is more complicated than I expected. Take your time, but not too much time. Marcus is already spinning narratives about your company to his remaining clients. The longer you wait, the harder your job becomes. After Victoria left, Helena and I sat in silence for a long moment. Well, Helena said finally, that was unexpected. She wants us to help commit corporate fratricide. She wants us to continue competing in the market while she uses our competition to clean house at Hammond. Is that different from what we were already doing? It feels different. Before, we were just winning clients because we're better. Now we'd be winning clients as part of someone else's internal power play. But the outcome is the same either way. Clients get better service. Communities benefit. Marcus loses his position. Does the motivation really matter? I thought about that. Did it matter? I'd started this to prove Marcus wrong, to show him that my career had value, to make him feel the kind of dismissal he'd made me feel for 3 years. That was personal. That was revenge. What Victoria was offering was a business partnership disguised as tactical information. Using her help meant my revenge became part of someone else's strategy. Did that diminish it? Or did it actually make it more effective? I think, I said slowly, that we need to consider what's best for our clients and for common ground. If Victoria's information helps us serve vulnerable communities better, if it helps us grow faster and help more people, then we should take it. The fact that it also helps her remove a problematic colleague is just synergy. Helena smiled. You're getting good at this business thing. Ruthless when necessary, principled when possible. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking I hired you for. I learned from the best. Marcus taught me how to identify vulnerability and exploit it. I'm just applying the lesson. Speaking of Marcus, have you heard from your sister? Not since Monday. I think she's decided I'm the villain in this story. Are you? I thought about that question. Was I the villain? I'd deliberately targeted Marcus's clients. I'd used information Claire had unwittingly provided. I'd planned this revenge for 8 months, carefully and methodically. I'd known it would hurt him professionally and hurt my relationship with Claire personally. But I'd also spent 7 years helping people Marcus's firm had hurt. I'd seen the damage his approach caused in communities. I'd heard the stories from workers who'd lost their jobs because Marcus had convinced their employers that people were expendable assets. I'd built my career on picking up the pieces after consultants like Marcus had destroyed lives in the name of efficiency. I don't think I'm the villain, I said finally. I think I'm the person who finally held Marcus accountable for consequences he's been avoiding for years. If that makes me a villain in Claire's story, that's something I'll have to live with. Good answer. Helena stood, preparing to leave. Think about Victoria's offer. We'll discuss it with the team tomorrow. But Kira, whatever you decide about the personal aspects of this situation, remember that you're not just fighting Marcus anymore. You're building something that could actually change how corporations interact with communities. Don't let the revenge part distract you from that. She left me alone in the hotel bar with my water and my thoughts. The revenge was supposed to be the end goal. Prove Marcus wrong, take his clients, watch him face consequences. Mission accomplished, mostly. But somewhere along the way, the revenge had become something bigger. I was actually doing meaningful work, helping communities, building a career that mattered, creating opportunities for people like Sophia to innovate in how social services intersected with corporate responsibility. Marcus had been right about one thing. Social work alone couldn't compete in the actual economy. But social work, combined with business strategy, combined with understanding both how communities functioned and how corporations operated, that was powerful in ways he'd never imagined. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. We need to talk. Tomorrow night? My place? I stared at that message for a long time before responding. Your place is Marcus's place. Neutral territory or nowhere. Her reply came quickly. Fine. Aldo's. 7 p.m. I'll be there. Tomorrow would bring another difficult conversation with my sister. Another chance to either repair or further damage our relationship. Another moment where I'd have to choose between the revenge I'd planned and the family I'd been born into. But tonight, I was going to go home, pour myself some decent wine, and review Victoria Crane's offer with fresh eyes. Because whether I was a villain or a hero or something in between, I was definitely winning. And after 3 years of being underestimated, winning felt damn good. Thursday evening at Aldo's Cafe, I arrived 10 minutes early and claimed a different table than the one Claire and I usually sat at. Small gesture, but it felt important. This conversation needed to happen on different terms than our usual sister chats. Claire showed up exactly on time, which meant she was as nervous as I was. She dressed down, jeans and a sweater, no jewelry except her wedding ring, trying to look approachable instead of like Marcus's wealthy wife. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You asked to talk. I'm here." She ordered her usual latte. I ordered my usual black coffee. Some things hadn't changed, even if everything else had. "I've been thinking a lot," Claire started, "about everything that's happened. About what you said last time, about me choosing Marcus over you, about me not defending you. And you were right, I've been making excuses for him for 3 years. Every time he made comments about your career, I told myself he didn't mean it the way it sounded. Every time he was dismissive or condescending, I rationalized it as just his personality, just his sense of humor. I chose comfort over honesty. I chose my marriage over my sister. Why are you telling me this now? Because I watched what happened this week. I saw Marcus completely lose it after you took his clients. I listened to him rant about you, about common ground, about how you'd betrayed him. And I realized something. He's never once considered that he might have deserved this. He's never acknowledged that maybe, possibly, he brought this on himself by how he treated you. Claire wrapped her hands around her mug, that same gesture of seeking warmth that she'd done at our last meeting. And I realized I'd been doing the same thing, assuming you'd always forgive me, always understand, always be there for me, no matter how badly Marcus treated you or how little I defended you. I took you for granted. Yeah, you did. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix 3 years of enabling his behavior, but I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did wrong. Does Marcus see what he did wrong? No, and that's part of the problem. Claire sighed. He's convinced you're orchestrating some kind of vendetta against him, that you've been planning this for months, that everything you're doing is motivated by revenge and spite. He's not wrong about the timeline. I have been planning this for 8 months. Since Christmas. Since I stood in your kitchen chopping vegetables while he and his colleagues laughed about the Chicago Heights project. Since I heard him call me a professional volunteer who'd helped myself into poverty. Since I realized that he saw me as less than human because I'd chosen a career that helps people instead of exploits them. He hurt you. He humiliated me. Repeatedly. For years. And you let him, Claire. Every single time you let him. She nodded, tears starting to form. I know, and I don't have an excuse for that. I should have shut him down. I should have made it clear that disrespecting you wasn't acceptable. But I was. She stopped, wiped her eyes. I was scared. Of what? Of him leaving. Of losing the life I'd built. Of having to admit that maybe I'd made a mistake marrying someone who could be so cruel to people he claimed to care about. She met my eyes. I know how that sounds. I know it's pathetic. But Kira, I've spent 3 years building a life around Marcus's money and Marcus's connections and Marcus's world. The thought of losing all that, of starting over, of having people know my marriage failed, it terrified me. More than losing your sister terrified you. Yes, and I hate myself for that. I hate that I prioritized my comfortable life over your dignity. I hate that it took you professionally destroying Marcus for me to finally wake up and see what I'd become. We sat in silence for a moment. The cafe was busy with the Thursday evening crowd. People meeting friends, working on laptops, escaping into the anonymity of a public space. Normal people with normal problems, unaware of the family drama unfolding in the corner booth. "I'm not stopping," I said finally. "If that's what this conversation is about, asking me to back off, to leave Marcus's remaining clients alone, to make peace, I'm not doing it. I've worked too hard to get here. Common Ground has invested too much. The clients we're winning deserve better service than what Hammond provides. I'm not stopping. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking if there's any way to repair our relationship while you're dismantling my husband's career. Honestly, I don't know, Claire, because as long as you're married to Marcus, as long as you go home to him every night and share his life, you're going to be caught between us. And I'm not going to pretend that's easy or that I have answers for how to navigate it. He's talking about trying to get you fired. He called Helena Park's office, tried to set up a meeting to discuss concerns about your professional conduct. She refused to meet with him. She would. Helena knows exactly what I'm doing and why. She supports it. He's also been calling his remaining clients, trying to preemptively poison them against you. Telling them you're inexperienced, that you're running some kind of personal vendetta, that working with Common Ground means getting caught in the middle of a family dispute. How's that working for him? Not well. 2 more clients called him this week to say they're considering switching to Common Ground. His partners are furious. There's talk of removing him from the Midwest operation entirely, reassigning him somewhere else where he can't do more damage. Good. Kira, he could lose his job. He should lose his job. He's bad at it, Claire. Not because he's not smart. He's very smart. But because he fundamentally doesn't respect the communities his clients operate in. He sees people as problems to eliminate rather than assets to cultivate. That's not sustainable business practice. It's just cruel efficiency. I know. I've been listening to him long enough to know you're right about that. She paused. There's something else. He's been drinking more, coming home angry. Yesterday he punched a wall and broke 2 of his fingers. He told people at work it was a gym accident, but I know it wasn't. That's not my problem. I know. But it is mine, and I don't know what to do about it. Do I stay with someone who's falling apart? Do I leave and prove everyone right who said I married him for money? Do I wait and see if he can recover from this? Those aren't questions I can answer for you, Claire. You have to decide what you want your life to look like. But I'll tell you this. If you're staying with Marcus because leaving would be uncomfortable, because it would require starting over, because it would mean admitting a mistake, then we're staying for the wrong reasons. And you'll end up resenting both him and yourself. When did you get so wise? When I spent 7 years working with people who'd lost everything and had to rebuild from nothing. They taught me that sometimes the hardest choice is the one that leads to freedom. My phone buzzed, a text from Helena. Victoria wants an answer by tomorrow. Are we taking her offer? I showed the message to Claire. Do you know Victoria Crane? Marcus's mentor? Yeah, I've met her at company events. Why? She approached Common Ground, offered to help us target Marcus's most vulnerable clients in exchange for eventual partnership between our companies. She basically wants to use our competition to force Hammond to remove Marcus from his position. Claire's eyes widened. She's using you to get rid of him? More like she's aligning with market forces that were already in motion. Marcus was going to lose these clients anyway. She's just making sure Hammond survives his failure by positioning themselves as having learned from it. That's incredibly calculating. That's business. Marcus taught me that. I studied my sister's face, trying to gauge her reaction. Should I take her offer? Why are you asking me? Because you're stuck in the middle of this. Because your husband is the target. Because whatever I decide affects you too. Claire was quiet for a long moment, stirring her latte even though it didn't need stirring. What would happen if you don't take her offer? I'd keep winning clients anyway, just slower. Marcus would probably lose his position eventually, but it might take longer. Hammond might struggle more in rebuilding because they wouldn't have the advantage of insider knowledge helping them adapt. And if you do take her offer, I accelerate Marcus's professional collapse. But I also position common ground for long-term success, create opportunities to help more communities, and potentially change how the entire consulting industry thinks about social responsibility. So taking her offer is better for everyone except Marcus. Yes, then take it. Claire met my eyes. I love my husband, but I'm not blind to what he's become. If his career falling apart forces him to actually evaluate his choices, his values, his impact on others, maybe that's what he needs. Maybe that's what I need to figure out if this marriage is worth saving. You're sure? No, but I'm sure that asking you to sacrifice your career to protect his ego isn't fair. You've spent 3 years sacrificing your dignity for my comfort. I'm done asking you to do that. We sat together for another hour, talking about smaller things. Our parents, who'd be appalled by this family mess if they were alive. Mutual friends who'd noticed the tension. Claire's admission that she'd been seeing a therapist to deal with everything. My confession that I'd been losing sleep over whether the revenge was worth the cost. You know what the worst part is? Claire said as we were leaving. Part of me is relieved. Part of me wants to see Marcus face consequences, because maybe then he'll become someone I can respect again. Does that make me a terrible wife? I think it makes you honest. Finally, we hugged goodbye, neither of us sure if our relationship could survive this or if we were just delaying the inevitable. But it felt different than last time. More real. More like we were actually seeing each other instead of performing the roles of sisters we'd always played. I went home and texted Helena, "Take Victoria's offer. Let's win this thing properly." Her response came back immediately. "I'll call her in the morning." "Kira, are you ready for what comes next?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Because that was the truth of it. I wasn't ready for the full implications of what I'd started. Wasn't ready for Claire's marriage potentially ending. Wasn't ready for Marcus's complete professional collapse. Wasn't ready for the weight of being responsible for someone else's downfall, even if they deserved it. But I was doing it anyway. Because 7 years ago, I'd chosen a career helping people who'd been discarded by society. I'd chosen to see value where others saw problems. I'd chosen to fight for people everyone else had written off. And somewhere along the way, I'd learned to fight for myself too. Marcus had called that choice a joke, had said I'd helped myself into poverty, had offered me a job as an office manager because he genuinely believed that was the best someone like me could do. He was about to learn that underestimating people was the most expensive mistake you could make in business. And unlike Marcus, I'd learned my lessons from people who actually knew how to survive. Friday morning, I woke up to 17 new emails and 4 missed calls. One of the calls was from a number I didn't recognize, but that showed up in my phone as Hammond Consulting Mainline. I listened to the voicemail over coffee. "Miss Thompson, this is Catherine Hammond, CEO of Hammond Consulting. I'm calling to request an urgent meeting regarding your professional conduct and potential interference with our business relationships. Please call my office immediately to schedule a time to discuss these serious matters. Catherine Hammond, the founder's granddaughter who'd taken over the firm 10 years ago and built it into one of Chicago's premier consulting companies. I'd known eventually she'd get involved. But I'd hoped for more time before facing the CEO directly. I called Helena before responding. Catherine Hammond wants a meeting, I said, about my professional conduct and interference with their business. Let her wait. We're meeting with Victoria in an hour to finalize our arrangement. Catherine doesn't get to dictate the terms of engagement. Should I be worried about legal action? No. Everything you've done is completely legal. You're competing for clients in an open market. If Hammond can't keep their clients satisfied, that's their problem, not yours. Catherine is just trying to intimidate you. It's kind of working. Good. Healthy fear keeps you sharp. But Kira, remember, you have leverage here. You're winning. They're losing. They need to adapt or die. Don't let them make you feel guilty for being good at your job. The meeting with Victoria took place at Common Ground's office this time. She arrived with a leather portfolio containing detailed information on Hammond's remaining Midwest clients. Who was happy? Who was wavering? Who was actively looking for alternatives? This is incredibly comprehensive, Helena said, reviewing the documents. How did you compile all this? I've been paying attention, something Marcus never learned to do. He thinks keeping clients is about delivering results. He doesn't understand it's about relationships, about trust, about making people feel valued instead of exploited. Sounds like you've been thinking about this for a while, I said. Years. Marcus is brilliant at numbers, but terrible with people. He's been costing Hammond clients for years because he can't or won't adapt his approach. I've been trying to push the firm toward more sustainable practices. But as long as Marcus kept bringing in short-term profits, the other partners didn't want to rock the boat. Until we started taking his clients. Until you started demonstrating that there was a better way. Now the partners can't ignore the problem anymore. They can't pretend Marcus's approach works when clients are actively fleeing to competitors offering exactly what I've been saying we should offer. Helena and Victoria worked out the details while I studied the client profiles. Victoria had included notes about each company's pain points, their history with Hammond, their decision-makers' priorities. It was exactly the kind of intelligence that would make my job significantly easier. One question, I said. What happens to you when Marcus finds out you've been helping us? Nothing, because I won't be helping you, officially. This conversation never happened. These documents came from a concerned Hammond employee who wishes to remain anonymous. If Marcus accuses me, I'll deny everything and point out that he's becoming paranoid as his client base collapses. He'll look even more unstable. That's cold, I said. That's necessary. Hammond is a 100-year-old firm with 300 employees. I'm not going to let Marcus's ego and outdated methods destroy all of that. If removing him requires unconventional tactics, so be it. And the partnership you mentioned? Between Hammond and Common Ground? Once Marcus is gone, and Hammond has successfully pivoted to a more sustainable consulting model, we approach Common Ground about strategic collaboration. We have different strengths. You're better at community engagement. We're better at operational efficiency. Together, we could offer clients comprehensive solutions that neither company can provide alone. Everyone wins. Except Marcus, I said. Except Marcus, Victoria agreed. But Marcus chose his path. He could have adapted. He could have listened when partners suggested alternative approaches. He could have valued relationships instead of just transactions. He made his choices. Now he gets to live with them. After Victoria left, Helena and I sat in her office reviewing the intelligence she'd provided. This changes our timeline, Helena said. With this information, we can probably win another 4 to 5 clients within the next month. That would effectively end Marcus's Midwest operation. That fast? That fast. The question is, do we want to move that fast? Or do we spread it out, give him time to adapt, make it less obvious that we had inside help? If we spread it out, we give him time to counterattack. Time to poison more potential clients against us. Time to potentially do real damage to Common Ground's reputation. True. But if we move too fast, we risk looking vindictive rather than competitive. The industry gossip is already suggesting this is personal. If we completely dismantle his client base in a month, that narrative gets stronger. Let it. We're winning because we're better, not because I'm vindictive. If people want to believe it's personal, let them. As long as our clients get better service and communities benefit, I don't care what the gossip says. You're starting to think like a CEO. That's good. My phone rang. Catherine Hammond's office again. This time I answered. Ms. Thompson, I'm glad you called back. Actually, you called me, Ms. Hammond. What can I do for you? You can stop targeting my firm's clients in what appears to be a coordinated campaign of competitive interference. I'm sorry, what? I'm competing for clients in an open market. That's literally how business works. when that competition becomes personal, when it's targeted specifically at one consultant because of family disputes, it crosses a line. Family disputes? You mean the fact that my brother-in-law has spent 3 years publicly mocking my career? That family dispute? Marcus's behavior at social events is between you and him. Using your professional position to retaliate is another matter entirely. Miss Hammond, with respect, I'm not retaliating. I'm succeeding. Your clients are unhappy with Hammond's services and prefer common grounds approach. That's market competition, not retaliation. You've taken 3 clients in 1 week and are actively courting 5 more. That's not coincidental market competition. That's targeted client poaching. It's targeted client service. We identified companies that would benefit from our approach and made our case. They agreed. If Hammond provided better service, they wouldn't be leaving. I want this to stop, now, before it escalates further. I'm afraid I can't do that. I have a job to do, clients to serve, a career to build. The fact that it happens to affect Marcus negatively is unfortunate, but it's not my problem. Then you leave me no choice but to pursue legal action for tortious interference with business relationships. You're welcome to try. But you should know that I've had common grounds lawyers review everything I've done. Every client contact, every proposal, every transition has been completely legal and ethical. You'll waste a lot of money on lawyers only to discover that competition isn't illegal, even when it's effective. This isn't over, Ms. Thompson. You're right. It's not. Because I have another 4 clients in serious talks about switching. And I'm not stopping until every single company that's been damaged by Hammond's short-sighted approach can work with someone who values sustainable community relationships. Have a good day, Ms. Hammond. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly. That conversation had been more confrontational than I'd planned, but I was tired of being treated like I was doing something wrong by being good at my job. That sounded intense, Helena said. Catherine Hammond thinks I'm engaged in some kind of illegal campaign against her firm. She threatened legal action. Let her threaten. Our lawyers will eat her alive if she actually tries to sue. Everything we're doing is textbook competitive practice. She's just not used to someone competing this effectively. The rest of Friday passed in a blur of meetings and strategy sessions. By evening, I'd identified 3 more Hammond clients worth approaching based on Victoria's intelligence. My team was energized, excited about the opportunities we were creating. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving too fast, spiraling into something bigger than I'd originally planned. I'd wanted to prove Marcus wrong, to show him my career had value, to make him feel dismissed the way he'd made me feel. Now I was caught in corporate warfare involving CEOs, senior partners, legal threats, and my sister's marriage. The revenge had become a crusade, and I wasn't entirely sure I was in control anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Marcus came home early. He's been fired. Not officially, but they're forcing him to resign. Pursue other opportunities, they called it. He's devastated. I don't know what to do. I stared at that message for a long time. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? Marcus facing consequences, his career collapsing, him finally understanding what it felt like to be diminished and dismissed. But reading Claire's text, imagining Marcus at home dealing with his professional destruction, I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. I felt hollow, like I'd won a battle but wasn't sure the victory meant what I'd thought it would. I typed back, "I'm sorry he's hurting. But Claire, he brought this on himself. You know that, right?" "I know. Doesn't make it easier to watch." "Are you okay?" "I don't know. Can we talk tomorrow?" "Yes. Call me when you're ready." I put my phone away and stared out my office window at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus was dealing with the collapse of everything he'd built. Claire was dealing with watching it happen. Catherine Hammond was probably strategizing about how to save her firm's reputation. Victoria Crane was probably celebrating her successful internal coup. And me? I was sitting in my new office with my new title, winner of the competition I'd engineered, architect of Marcus's downfall. So why did winning feel so much like losing? Saturday morning, Claire called at 9 a.m. Her voice sounded tired, strained. "Can you come over? Marcus is at the gym. We have a few hours." "To your place? I thought we agreed on neutral territory." "Please, Kira, I need to show you something." Against my better judgment, I agreed. An hour later, I was standing in Claire's marble kitchen again, the scene of so many family gatherings, so much casual cruelty disguised as concern. "Thanks for coming," Claire said. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept. "Coffee?" "Sure." She made coffee in silence, the kind of heavy silence that meant she was organizing her thoughts. I waited, looking around the kitchen that had always intimidated me. The custom cabinets, the professional-grade appliances, the marble countertops that cost more than my entire year's rent. Money couldn't buy happiness, apparently, but it could buy a very expensive backdrop for misery. "He's not handling this well," Claire said finally, handing me a mug. Yesterday, after they told him to resign, he came home and destroyed his study. Threw books, broke his laptop, punched holes in the walls. Then he drank himself unconscious. "I've never seen him like this. I'm sorry you're going through that. Are you? Because you caused it." The accusation hung in the air between us. I took a sip of coffee, choosing my words carefully. I competed for clients who were unhappy with Hammond's services. Marcus's inability to keep those clients satisfied caused his professional problems, not me. You targeted him specifically. You planned this for 8 months. You used information I told you about his work. Don't pretend this was just normal business competition. You're right. I did target him. After 3 years of him targeting me at every family event, after 3 years of him treating me like a failure, after 3 years of him mocking my career, my choices, my life. Yes, Claire, I targeted him. And I'd do it again. Even knowing it's destroying my marriage? Your marriage was already in trouble. I'm just making it visible. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one dealing with the fallout. You're not the one watching someone you love fall apart. You're not the one trying to figure out if your relationship can survive this level of professional humiliation. You're right, I'm not. But I am the one who spent 3 years being humiliated while you stood by and said nothing. So forgive me if I don't feel guilty about Marcus finally facing consequences. Claire set down her coffee mug with a sharp click. I asked you here because I wanted to show you something, to help you understand what you've done. She led me to Marcus's study, the room he'd disappeared into during family gatherings, the space I'd never been invited to enter. Now I understood why. The room was destroyed. Books scattered across the floor, shelves pulled from the walls, holes punched in the drywall, his desk overturned, computer equipment smashed. "This is what your revenge looks like," Claire said quietly. "This is what winning has done." I looked at the destruction, trying to feel something. Guilt, satisfaction, regret, but all I felt was tired. Tired of being blamed for Marcus's inability to handle failure. Tired of being expected to sacrifice my success for his comfort. Tired of Claire treating me like I'd done something wrong by being good at my job. "This is what Marcus's inability to cope with consequences looks like," I corrected. I didn't force him to destroy his study. I didn't make him drink himself unconscious. Those were his choices, Claire. Just like mocking my career for 3 years was his choice. Just like treating communities like obstacles instead of assets was his choice. I'm not responsible for his emotional regulation. You're really not going to take any responsibility for this? For what? For competing effectively in my industry? For winning clients because I offer better service? For proving that my joke career actually taught me valuable skills? No, Claire, I'm not taking responsibility for that. Those are accomplishments, not crimes. He lost his job because of you. He lost his job because he was bad at it, because he alienated clients, because he refused to adapt to a changing market, because his own firm realized he was costing them money and reputation. I just accelerated the inevitable. You sound so cold, like you don't care at all. I do care. I care that 40 people lost their jobs in Chicago Heights because Marcus convinced their employer that efficiency mattered more than community. I care that his consulting approach has damaged neighborhoods across the Midwest. I care that he spent 3 years making me feel worthless while I watched him hurt people and call it business. So yes, Claire, I care. I'm just not caring about the things you want me to care about. We stood in Marcus's destroyed study, sisters on opposite sides of a divide that felt unbridgeable. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay, to be the supportive sister I'd always been. But I was tired of being that sister, tired of making myself smaller to make others comfortable, tired of apologizing for succeeding. I should go, I said. Kira, wait. There's something else you should know. What? Marcus is talking about going to the press, telling them that you orchestrated a personal vendetta disguised as business competition, that you used family information to target his clients, that Common Ground is unethically interfering with Hammond's business relationships. Let him. Everything I've done is legal and documented. I'll be happy to explain to any journalist who asks that I competed fairly for clients who are dissatisfied with their current consulting services. He has emails between us where I mentioned specific clients, specific problems Marcus was dealing with. He's saying you used that information to target vulnerabilities. I felt cold suddenly. I had used information from Claire, not deliberately. She'd shared it innocently, venting about Marcus's work stress, but I had used it. I'd filed it away, remembered details, used it to inform my competitive strategy. Did you tell him you gave me that information? I told him I talked to you about his work. Like wives talk to sisters. He's twisting it into corporate espionage. It's not corporate espionage. You were venting about your husband's job. I was listening as your sister. The fact that I also happened to use that general knowledge to inform my competitive strategy doesn't make it illegal or unethical, but it looks bad. He's going to make it look like you deliberately pumped me for information to use against him. Did I? What? Did I deliberately pump you for information? Did I ask leading questions? Did I encourage you to share details about his clients? Or did you volunteer that information during normal conversations? Claire was quiet for a moment. You never asked. I just told you, because I was frustrated and you were there, and I needed someone to talk to. Then that's what I'll tell any journalist who asks. My sister was unhappy with her husband's work stress and shared her frustrations with me during family conversations. As her sister, I listened and supported her. As a professional in the same industry, I was aware that her complaints reflected broader problems with Hammond's approach. I didn't need to pump her for information. She was describing publicly known problems that any industry analyst could have identified. Marcus won't see it that way. Marcus doesn't get to control how people see things anymore. That's what happens when you lose your job and your reputation. You lose the power to dictate narratives. You're enjoying this. His failure, his pain, you're actually enjoying it. I thought about that. Was I enjoying it? The professional victory, yes. The proof that my career had value, absolutely. The satisfaction of finally being taken seriously, definitely. But Marcus's personal destruction, the demolished study, the drinking, the desperate threats to go to the press, that just felt empty. Like I'd won a battle, but the victory was hollow because the person I'd been fighting had turned out to be more fragile than I'd realized. I'm not enjoying his pain, I said, finally. But I'm not apologizing for his consequences either. Marcus spent 3 years teaching me that business is ruthless, that emotions don't matter, that people are just assets to be optimized. I'm just applying those lessons better than he did. He's my husband, he's falling apart, and you don't care at all. I care that you're hurting. I don't care that he's finally facing accountability. There's a difference. Get out, please. Just get out. I left. Walked through the marble foyer, out the heavy front door, into the cool October morning. I'd returned to the scene of my humiliation, Marcus's home, Claire's kitchen, and instead of feeling vindicated, I just felt tired. My phone rang as I was driving away. Helena, we have a problem. Catherine Hammond is calling an industry meeting. She's accusing Common Ground of unethical business practices and demanding an investigation into our client acquisition methods. When? Monday, 3 p.m. It's technically a voluntary meeting, but most of the major consulting firms in Chicago will be there. If we don't show up, it looks like we have something to hide. Do we? Not legally, but ethically, some people are going to question whether your relationship with Marcus created a conflict of interest. Whether you used family information inappropriately. Whether Common Ground should have been more careful about your personal motivations in targeting Hammond clients. So what do? We show up. We present our case. We demonstrate that everything we did was legal, ethical, and within industry standards. And Kira, you need to be prepared to answer questions about your personal relationship with Marcus, about whether this was revenge disguised as competition. What should I say? The truth. That Marcus spent years demeaning your career. That you built Common Ground strategy around legitimate market opportunities. That your personal motivation to prove him wrong doesn't negate the fact that you competed fairly and won based on superior service. But say it professionally. Don't let them bait you into sounding vindictive. After we hung up, I drove aimlessly for a while, not ready to go home, not sure where else to go. I ended up at the Common Ground office, sitting in my director's office on a Saturday afternoon, staring at the walls. 8 months ago, I'd overheard Marcus mock my career in Claire's kitchen. I'd made a decision that day to prove him wrong, to build something that mattered, to show him that my joke career had taught me skills he couldn't imagine. Now I'd succeeded beyond my expectations. I had the title, the salary, the professional respect. I'd won clients from Marcus's firm. I'd helped communities Hammond had damaged. I'd built a career I could be proud of. But I'd also destroyed my relationship with Claire, watched Marcus's career collapse, and now faced an industry investigation into my ethics. The revenge I'd planned so carefully had spiraled into something bigger, messier, more complicated than I'd anticipated. Was it worth it? I kept asking myself that question. Was proving Marcus wrong worth losing my sister? Was my professional success worth watching someone else's professional destruction? I didn't have answers. Just a meeting on Monday where I'd have to defend choices I'd made when I was angry and hurt and tired of being underestimated. And the knowledge that whatever happened in that meeting, I couldn't undo any of this. The revenge had been executed. The Common Ground's lawyers joined us by video call, reviewing the legal framework that protected my actions. The key thing to remember, one of the lawyers explained, is that you never did anything illegal. You competed for clients in an open market. The information you used to identify targets was either publicly available or came from casual conversations with your sister that she initiated. You never signed a non-disclosure agreement with Hammond. You never accessed their confidential systems. You never bribed anyone or engaged in any deceptive practices. But the perception, I started. The perception is that you had personal motivations for competing against your brother-in-law. That's true. But personal motivation doesn't make competition illegal or unethical, as long as the competition itself follows proper business practices. Plenty of people start businesses to compete with former employers who treated them badly. Plenty of people target competitors who've wronged them personally. That's capitalism. So what's Hammond's angle here? They want to create enough doubt about your ethics that potential clients think twice about switching. They want to muddy the waters, make this about personal vendetta rather than superior service. They want to suggest that working with common ground means getting caught up in family drama. How do I counter that? By focusing on outcomes. Talk about the communities you've helped, the sustainable business practices you've implemented, the long-term success your clients are seeing. Make it clear that your personal motivation to succeed doesn't change the fact that you're actually succeeding based on merit. That night, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios, imagining questions, rehearsing answers. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and started writing out talking points, organizing my thoughts, preparing for battle. My phone buzzed at 4 a.m. A text from Claire. Marcus is drinking again. Says tomorrow's meeting is his chance to destroy you the way you destroyed him. I tried to talk him out of it. He won't listen. Be careful. I stared at that message for a long time. Claire warning me about Marcus. Claire choosing to give me information that could help me prepare for his attack. Claire finally, maybe picking a side, or maybe just being worried enough about what Marcus might do to give me a heads up. I typed back, "Thank you for telling me. Are you safe, physically? Yes. Everything else? I don't know. If you need somewhere to stay, my door is always open. I know. That's why I'm telling you this. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Marcus says, remember that I love you. Even when I'm angry at you, even when I don't understand your choices, I love you. I love you too. I'll call you after the meeting." Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Chicago weather matching the mood. I dressed carefully, professional but not expensive, competent but not flashy. I needed to look like someone who'd earned her position through merit, not like someone playing dress-up and borrowed success. Helena picked me up at 2 p.m. "You ready?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." That's the spirit. Remember, we're not on trial here. This is an industry meeting, not a legal proceeding. Catherine can make accusations all she wants. She still has to prove them, and she can't because they're not true. What if Marcus makes a scene? Let him. If he shows up drunk and ranting about personal vendettas, he makes our case for us. He'll look like someone who can't handle professional failure and is lashing out inappropriately. The meeting was held at the Chicago Association of Business Consultants headquarters, a downtown building that hosted industry events and professional gatherings. By the time we arrived at 2:45, the conference room was already half full. I recognized most of the faces, executives from various consulting firms, some Hammond employees who'd been invited to provide context, a few journalists who'd somehow gotten word of the meeting. Catherine Hammond stood at the front of the room, talking with Victoria Crane and 2 other Hammond partners. She saw me enter, and her expression hardened. Victoria, for her part, gave me the slightest nod of acknowledgement before looking away. Marcus wasn't there yet. Maybe he wouldn't show up. Maybe Claire had convinced him to stay home. At exactly 3 p.m., Catherine called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We're here to discuss some concerns that have arisen regarding competitive practices in our industry, specifically relating to Common Ground Solutions and their recent client acquisition strategy." She clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the screen behind her. Over the past 2 weeks, Common Ground has acquired 3 Hammond Consulting clients and is actively pursuing several more. While client movement is normal in our industry, the speed and specificity of these acquisitions has raised questions about whether proper ethical boundaries were observed. "Are you accusing Common Ground of unethical behavior?" one of the journalists asked. "I'm asking the question because we've discovered that Common Ground's Director of Strategy, Kira Thompson, is related by marriage to Marcus Bradford, who was until recently Hammond's lead consultant for the Midwest region. We've also discovered that Ms. Thompson had access to information about Hammond's client relationships through family conversations that may have been inappropriately used to target vulnerable clients." "May have?" Helena said from beside me. That's a serious accusation to make without proof. The proof is in the timing and targeting. Miss Thompson accepted her position at Common Ground 3 months ago, but only announced it publicly after a family event where Mr. Bradford allegedly made disparaging comments about her career. Immediately after that event, Common Ground launched a coordinated campaign specifically targeting Mr. Bradford's clients. The connection seems obvious. The connection, I said, standing up, is that I'm good at my job. I identified clients who were unhappy with Hammond's services and offered them a better alternative. They agreed because Common Ground provides superior community engagement strategies. My relationship with Marcus Bradford is irrelevant to the quality of our work. Is it? Or did you use family connections to access confidential information about client vulnerabilities? I used my professional expertise to identify market opportunities. The information I used was either publicly available or came from general industry knowledge. I never accessed Hammond's confidential files, never violated any agreements, never engaged in any deceptive practices. But you admit you had personal motivations for targeting Hammond clients specifically? Before I could answer, the conference room doors opened. Marcus walked in, and the room went quiet. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled suit, eyes red-rimmed. But he was sober, or at least appeared to be. I have something to say, Marcus announced. Walking to the front of the room, Catherine tried to stop him, but he waved her off. Everyone here should know what Kira Thompson really is. She's not an innovative strategist. She's not a community engagement expert. She's a vindictive social worker who spent 8 months planning to destroy my career because I hurt her feelings. Marcus, this isn't, Catherine started. Let him talk, I said. I want everyone to hear this. Marcus turned to me and I saw on his face something I'd never seen before. Genuine pain. Not just anger or humiliation, but actual grief. You won, he said. Okay, you won. I lost my job, my reputation, my clients. You proved that your career has value and mine doesn't. You showed everyone that the social worker was smarter than the private equity consultant. Congratulations, Kira. You got your revenge. Happy now? This isn't about revenge. This is about you facing consequences for treating communities like obstacles and people like spreadsheet items. No, it's about you being hurt and lashing out. It's about me making some stupid jokes at a party and you deciding to destroy my entire life in response. It's about you being so small and petty that you couldn't just succeed. You had to make sure I failed too. I didn't make you fail, Marcus. Your approach to consulting made you fail. I just provided an alternative that clients preferred. Using information my wife gave you. Using family connections. Using the fact that you knew exactly where I was vulnerable because Claire told you everything. Claire vented about her husband's work stress to her sister. That's not corporate espionage. That's normal family conversation. If you didn't want me to know that your clients were unhappy, maybe you should have actually kept them happy. See? Marcus turned to address the room. She doesn't even deny it. She used family information. She targeted me personally. She disguised revenge as competition. And now she's trying to claim the moral high ground because she helps poor people. Well, congratulations, Kira. You helped yourself right into my job, using tactics you'd condemn in anyone else. The room was silent. Everyone watching this family drama play out in what was supposed to be a professional setting. I could feel them judging, weighing, deciding who to believe. You're right, I said quietly. I did use information Claire shared with me. Not because I deliberately pumped her for it, but because I listened when she talked and remembered what she said. I did target you specifically after you humiliated me at Claire's dinner party. I did plan this carefully and methodically for 8 months. Catherine looked triumphant. Marcus looked vindicated. Helena looked concerned. But, I continued, None of that makes what I did illegal or unethical. You taught me something important, Marcus. You taught me that business is ruthless, that emotions don't matter, that the only thing that counts is results. You taught me that by spending 3 years mocking my career, dismissing my choices, treating me like a charity case. So I took those lessons and I applied them. I identified your weaknesses. I developed a superior strategy, and I competed effectively. That's not revenge. That's business. It's both, Marcus said, and you know it. Maybe it is, but here's the thing. Even if I was motivated by revenge, even if I started this because you hurt me, that doesn't change the fact that I'm actually better at this than you are. Your clients are happier with common ground. The communities we serve are seeing better outcomes. The businesses we work with are more sustainable. My personal motivations don't negate my professional results. So that makes it okay? Personal vendettas disguised as competition? No. What makes it okay is that I competed fairly, offered better services, and won clients based on merit. What makes it okay is that everything I did was legal and ethical, even if it was personally motivated. What makes it okay is that I spent 7 years learning skills you thought were worthless, and those skills turned out to be more valuable than your Ivy League education and trust fund connections. I turned to address the whole room. Yes, I targeted Hammond clients. Yes, I was motivated by personal hurt. But I also genuinely believe that Common Ground's approach is better for businesses and communities. I believe sustainable engagement matters more than short-term efficiency. I believe treating people with dignity produces better long-term results than treating them like problems to eliminate. If believing those things and competing based on them makes me unethical, then I guess I'm unethical. But I'd rather be unethical by Hammond's standards than successful by them. Catherine stepped forward. Miss Thompson, are you admitting to using family information to gain competitive advantage? I'm admitting to being a human being who listened when her sister talked and remembered conversations. I'm admitting to using general industry knowledge, some of which came from family interactions, to inform my competitive strategy. But I never accessed confidential files, never violated any agreements, never did anything that thousands of other professionals don't do every day when they use their personal networks to inform business decisions. That's a very fine line you're walking. Then let's examine that line. How many people in this room have used information from former colleagues to compete with former employers? How many have used industry contacts, including friends and family, to identify business opportunities? How many have been motivated by personal slights to prove themselves professionally? If using personal knowledge and personal motivation to compete effectively is unethical, then half the businesses in Chicago are unethical. I looked around the room, making eye contact with various executives. Several of them shifted uncomfortably. Because I was right, what I'd done wasn't unusual. It was just more visible, because it involved family, because it was successful, because Marcus had lost so spectacularly. Common Ground's practices are sound, I continued. Our client relationships are strong. Our results speak for themselves. If Hammond wants to investigate us, they're welcome to try. But they won't find anything wrong because nothing we've done is wrong. It's just effective. And if Marcus can't handle losing to someone he underestimated, that's a Marcus problem, not a Common Ground problem. Micah stepped toward me, and for a moment I thought he might actually try to hit me. But he stopped, swaying slightly, and I realized he wasn't sober after all. He was drunk and barely holding it together. "You destroyed my life," he said again, quieter this time. "And you don't even care. I destroyed your career. Your life is something you'll have to figure out how to rebuild. Just like all the people in Chicago Heights had to rebuild after your consulting recommendations cost them their jobs. Just like all the communities across the Midwest have had to rebuild after Hammond's efficiency initiatives damaged their social fabric. Welcome to consequences, Marcus. They're uncomfortable, aren't they? He turned and walked out of the conference room. After a moment of stunned silence, Catherine announced that the meeting was concluded and Hammond would be reviewing the issues raised today. As people filed out, several executives approached me, some to express support, some to ask questions about Common Ground services, some just to shake my hand and acknowledge what I'd said. The journalists were already typing on their phones, filing stories about the dramatic confrontation. Helena pulled me aside. That was either brilliant or career suicide. I'm not sure which yet. I told the truth. That's all I could do. You also made it very clear that this was personal. That's going to follow you. Let it. I'm tired of pretending I'm not human. I'm tired of acting like professional decisions don't have personal contexts. Yes, I was hurt by Marcus. Yes, I wanted to prove him wrong. But I also built something valuable in the process. People can judge that however they want. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. I watched from outside the door. I'm proud of you. And I'm leaking Marcus. Not because of you, because of who he's become. Or maybe who he always was and I just didn't want to see. Can we talk? I showed the message to Helena. She read it and smiled. Looks like you won more than just the professional battle. I'm not sure I won anything, but I'm definitely done losing. We left the building together, walking out into the cold Chicago afternoon. Tomorrow would bring more consequences. Industry gossip, client reactions, whatever Hammond decided to do next. But today, I'd stood in front of my peers and told the truth. About my motivations, about my methods, about the fact that personal and professional weren't always as separate as people wanted to pretend. Marcus had called me small and petty. Maybe he was right. Maybe using my skills to compete against someone who'd hurt me was petty. Maybe letting my anger fuel my ambition was small. But I'd also built something real, something that helped people, something that challenged an industry to think differently about how business and community interacted. If that was revenge, I could live with it. The industry response to Monday's confrontation was swift and mixed. Some executives praised my honesty about personal motivations. Others criticized my admission that I'd targeted Marcus specifically. The consensus seemed to be that I'd been legally correct, but ethically questionable, which, honestly, was about what I'd expected. Tuesday morning, I met with Helena and Common Ground's leadership team to discuss fallout management. 3 more clients have reached out since yesterday, Helena reported. All former Hammond clients interested in our services. Apparently, watching you stand up to Marcus publicly was good marketing. Or they're disaster tourists who want to work with the controversial consultant, I said. Either way, they're potential revenue. We'll vet them carefully, make sure they're genuine fits for our services. But Kira, you need to understand, you've become famous. Or infamous. People are talking about you. That means more scrutiny, more attention, more pressure. Can I handle it? That's what I'm asking you, because this is just the beginning. If we keep growing at this rate, you're going to be the face of Common Ground's Midwest operation. You'll do interviews, speak at conferences, represent the company publicly. Are you ready for that? I thought about it. A week ago, I'd been focused on revenge, proving Marcus wrong, winning his clients, watching retry and continue him face consequences. Now I was being asked to become a public figure, to represent a philosophy of business that challenged industry norms, to defend my methods and motivations in front of audiences who'd already decided whether they liked me or not. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted, but I'm willing to try, because if I back down now, if I let the controversy scare me into hiding, then Marcus wins. He gets to say that I couldn't handle the pressure, that I was just an angry social worker who got lucky. I'm not giving him that satisfaction. Good answer, Helena said. Because we already have 5 speaking requests, industry conferences, business schools, professional associations. They all want to hear from the woman who challenged traditional consulting models and won. Or they want to hear from the woman who admitted to professional revenge and see if she'll implode publicly. Also a possibility. But either way, it's opportunity. How you use it is up to you. The rest of Tuesday was spent fielding calls and managing the aftermath. Hammond Consulting released a statement saying they disagreed with Common Ground's characterization of events, but wouldn't pursue legal action. Translation: we checked with our lawyers and realized you didn't actually do anything illegal, so we're backing down while pretending we're taking the high road. Catherine Hammond personally called Helena to propose a ceasefire. Keep your existing clients, she'd said, but stop actively pursuing Hammond accounts. Give us space to rebuild and rebrand under Victoria's direction. Helena had listened politely and declined. We'll continue competing in the open market, she'd said. If Hammond can provide better services than Common Ground, you'll keep your clients. If we can provide better services, we'll win them. That's how competition works. By Wednesday, the story had spread beyond Chicago's consulting industry. Business publications were writing about the social worker who disrupted corporate consulting. Professional organizations were debating whether personal motivation invalidated competitive success. Business schools were using my case as a teaching example about ethics and strategy. I became a meme, literally. Someone had screenshotted my quote from the Monday meeting. Welcome to consequences, Marcus. They're uncomfortable, aren't they? And it was spreading across social media as shorthand for people finally facing accountability. It was surreal. A week ago, I'd been a relatively unknown consultant. Now I had people I'd never met debating my character and my choices in public forums. Wednesday afternoon, I finally met with Claire. We chose Aldo's again. Back to neutral territory. Back to familiar ground. She looked different, lighter somehow. Like she'd been carrying weight she'd finally set down. I left him, she said, without preamble, packed my stuff Monday night and moved into a hotel. I'm looking for an apartment now. Something small, something that's mine. How do you feel? Terrified, relieved, guilty, free, all of it at once. She stirred her latte, same drink, same nervous gesture. He didn't try to stop me. That's what told me I was making the right choice. He was more upset about losing his job than losing me. I'm sorry, Claire. Are you? Because you're part of why my marriage ended. You are targeting his clients, exposing his failures. It accelerated something that was probably already dying, but still, you had a role in this. I did, and I'm not sure if I'm sorry about that or not. I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm not sorry that Marcus is facing consequences. I don't know how to reconcile those two things. That's honest, at least. Claire looked at me carefully. Mom would have hated this. The family drama, the public fighting, the divorce. She always wanted us to stay close, to support each other no matter what. Our mother had died 5 years ago, our father 6 months before her. They'd been married for 37 years, deeply in love until the end. They'd left us with an inheritance of love and student loans. They'd had plenty of the former, not much of the latter. Mom would have wanted you to be happy, I said, even if that meant leaving Marcus. Even if that meant our family looked messy for a while. I hope so, because right now, everything's a mess. I'm 34 years old, getting divorced, starting over with basically nothing because the prenup I signed gives me almost nothing from the marriage. I have a teaching degree I haven't used in 6 years because Marcus said I didn't need to work. I'm exactly where you were 7 years ago, broke, starting over, trying to figure out how to build a life. You're not broke. You have skills, education, family. You'll be fine. Will I? Because I'm not you, Kira. I'm not a brilliant strategist who can turn personal hurt into professional triumph. I'm just someone who made bad choices and now has to live with them. You're someone who had the courage to leave when it wasn't working. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing right now. We sat in silence for a moment, two sisters who'd almost lost each other. trying to find their way back to something resembling a relationship. "I'm going back to teaching," Claire said finally. "I called my old school district. They have openings. It won't pay well, but it's something I'm good at, something I actually care about. I'm going to rebuild, slowly, on my own terms. That's brave. It's terrifying. But watching you these past 2 weeks, watching you stand up to Marcus, refuse to back down, build something meaningful out of your anger, it reminded me that I used to be brave too. Before I let Marcus's money and status make me comfortable and small. You were never small. I was. I let myself become small because it was easier than fighting. You didn't. You fought. And yeah, it was messy and personal, and probably violated some unspoken rules about keeping family and business separate. But you won, Kira. You actually won. Did I? Because it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like I burned down half my life to prove a point. But you proved it. That's more than most people do. My phone buzzed. A text from Helena. "Sofia Hernandez's proposal is excellent. I want to move forward with the supported employment program. Can you lead the pilot?" I showed the message to Claire. "Remember I told you about the social worker who reached out with an idea? Helena wants to implement it. A program where we help corporations hire from vulnerable populations with full support services. That's amazing. That's exactly the kind of work you've always wanted to do." It is. And it's only possible because I have this position, because Common Ground is succeeding, because I competed against Marcus and won. The revenge created opportunities I never would have had otherwise. So it was worth it. All the drama, all the pain, all the damage to our relationship, it was worth it for professional success. I thought about that question, really thought about it. The past 2 weeks had been the most intense, stressful, complicated period of my professional life. I'd proven Marcus wrong, built something valuable, created opportunities that could help hundreds of people. I'd also damaged my relationship with Claire, watched my brother-in-law's career collapse, and become infamous in Chicago's business community. "I don't know if it was worth it," I said honestly, "but I know I'd do it again, because the alternative, staying quiet, accepting how Marcus treated me, letting him continue to mock my career, that wasn't sustainable either. Something had to change. I chose to be the one who changed it, even knowing the cost, Claire reached across the table and took my hand. "Then I support you. I don't agree with everything you did. I think you could have found a less destructive way to prove your point. But I understand why you did it, and I don't blame you anymore. Marcus made his choices. You made yours. I'm just sorry I got caught in the middle. You're not in the middle anymore. No, I'm on your side now. Whatever that means going forward." We finished our coffee and made plans to meet again the following week. Claire wanted help apartment hunting. I wanted to hear about her teaching interviews. We were finding our way back to being sisters, slowly, carefully, with new boundaries and new honesty. As I was leaving, my phone rang. An unknown number, but I was getting used to those by now. Kira Thompson. "Miss Thompson, this is Arthur Brennan from the Chicago Business Journal. I'm writing a profile on you for our monthly Spotlight feature. Would you be willing to sit for an interview?" "What kind of profile?" "The kind that asks how a social worker disrupted one of Chicago's premier consulting firms. The kind that explores whether business competition and personal revenge can coexist ethically. The kind that might actually be fair to you instead of just repeating industry gossip." "When? Tomorrow?" "I'll buy you lunch. Make it coffee. I have a full schedule. Coffee works. Noon at Aldo's?" I smiled. Aldo's was becoming my unofficial office for difficult conversations. "Noon works. I'll be there." After he hung up, I sat in my car for a moment, processing everything. The interview would probably be uncomfortable. He'd ask hard questions about my motivations, my methods, my ethics. But he'd also give me a chance to tell my story in my own words, to explain the complexity that had been reduced to sound bites and social media memes. That evening, I went home to my tiny apartment in Logan Square. The apartment Marcus had mocked as evidence of my poverty. The apartment that had been strategic, that had let me save money and build capital and execute the plan that had brought me here. I poured myself some decent wine and opened my laptop. New emails from potential clients, speaking requests, interview inquiries. My professional life was expanding faster than I could manage. But that was a good problem to have, better than the alternative of being ignored and dismissed. I pulled up Sophia's proposal and read through it again. Her idea for supported employment was innovative and compassionate, exactly the kind of program that could actually change lives. With Common Ground's resources and my industry connections, we could make it real. You could help hundreds of people who'd been written off by society find stable employment and rebuild their lives. That's what this was supposed to be about. Not revenge, not proving Marcus wrong, but actually helping people, building systems that worked, challenging an industry to think differently about success. The revenge had been the catalyst. The success was the result. And now I had to figure out how to separate one from the other, how to be known for what I'd built instead of what I'd destroyed. My phone buzzed one more time, a text from Marcus. I don't forgive you. I probably never will, but I understand why you did it. And for what it's worth, you were right. I was bad at my job. I was bad at relationships. I was bad at seeing people as anything other than problems to solve. I'm getting help. Therapy. AA. Trying to figure out how to be someone better. Not for you. Not even for Claire. For myself. Because I don't like who I became. Thanks for the wake-up call. Even if it destroyed my life in the process, I read that message 3 times. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. Recognition that I'd been right about him, that his fall had been earned, that maybe, just maybe, consequences could lead to growth. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Marcus needed to figure out his own path forward, just like I'd figured out mine, just like Claire was figuring out hers. But I saved the message, because someday, when I doubted whether the revenge had been worth it, when I questioned whether destroying someone's career could ever be justified, I'd look at that text and remember that sometimes consequences were the only thing that forced people to change. Tomorrow would bring the interview, more questions about my ethics and motivations, more opportunities to defend or explain or justify. But tonight, alone in my tiny apartment with my decent wine, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Marcus had said women who chose social work were people who couldn't cut it in real professions. He'd said I'd helped myself into poverty. He'd offered me a job as an office manager because he genuinely believed that was the height of my potential. He'd been wrong about all of it, and now everyone knew it. 6 months later, I stood in front of 300 people at the Midwest Business Ethics Conference, giving the keynote speech about competitive strategy and personal motivation in professional life. The irony wasn't lost on me. A woman who'd admitted to professionally motivated revenge was now speaking about business ethics. But Helena had insisted. You have something valuable to say. People need to hear it. So here I was, looking out at a sea of faces. Consultants, executives, business students, journalists, all waiting to hear from the woman who'd become famous for admitting that professional success and personal revenge weren't mutually exclusive. I'm going to start, I said, by acknowledging the elephant in the room. Yes, I targeted my brother-in-law's clients specifically. Yes, I was motivated by personal hurt and anger. Yes, I planned my competitive strategy around proving him wrong after years of him dismissing my career. And yes, I'd probably do it again if I had to start over. The room was silent, attentive. I'd learned over the past 6 months that people appreciated honesty more than pretending to be perfect. But here's what I've learned since then. Personal motivation doesn't invalidate professional results. Being human, being hurt, being angry, being determined to prove doubters wrong doesn't make you unethical. It makes you honest about the complexity of business decisions. I click to my first slide, showing Common Ground's growth over the past 6 months. 12 new clients, 42 employees. The supported employment program now helping 63 people find stable jobs. Revenue up 240%. These are the results of the strategy I built. Yes, it started with revenge, but it continued with genuine value creation, with helping communities, with challenging an industry to think differently about success and sustainability. Another slide showing testimonials from clients, workers we'd helped employ, communities that had benefited from our approach. My critics say I crossed ethical lines by using family information and personal motivation to compete. They're not entirely wrong, but they're also not entirely right. Because what I actually did was use the skills my joke career taught me to compete effectively in a market that desperately needed disruption. I paused, making eye contact with various people in the audience. Social work taught me how to see potential where others saw problems, how to find solutions where others saw obstacles, how to fight for people when everyone else had given up. Those skills translated directly to business strategy. I could identify opportunities others missed. I could build relationships others couldn't. I could create value in spaces others dismissed. My brother-in-law thought social work was a profession for people who couldn't compete in the real economy. What he didn't understand was that social work had taught me how to compete better than any MBA program ever could. Because I understood something fundamental. Businesses need communities. Communities are assets, not obstacles. And treating people with dignity produces better long-term results than treating them as disposable resources. I clicked to a slide showing the Chicago Heights project, the one Marcus had gutted, the one that had first made me realize how damaging his approach was. This is what my revenge was really about. Not just proving Marcus wrong, but proving that there's a better way to do business, a way that values sustainability over short-term gains, a way that treats communities as partners instead of problems, a way that acknowledges that businesses exist within social contexts and ignoring those contexts is bad strategy. Did I use revenge as motivation? Absolutely. Did that make my strategy less valid? No, because motivation is just the catalyst. Results are what matter. And the results show that my approach works. I spent the next 30 minutes detailing Common Ground's methodology, our outcomes, the ripple effects we'd created, then opened it up for questions. The first hand up belonged to a young woman in the back. Aren't you worried about being known as the revenge consultant? About that reputation following you? It already follows me. I can't change that. But I can control what I do with the platform it created. If being known as the revenge consultant means I get to speak at conferences like this, means I get to influence how the next generation thinks about business ethics, means I get to challenge people's assumptions about what motivates success, then I'll take that reputation. But don't you regret how it affected your family? Every day. My sister's marriage ended. My brother-in-law's career collapsed. My family dynamics will never be the same. Those are real costs, real pain. But I also know that staying silent, accepting how I was treated, pretending my career didn't matter, that would have cost me too. Different costs. Quieter costs, but still costs. Another hand, what would you say to young professionals who are being underestimated or dismissed in their careers? I'd say, document everything. Build your case. Develop your skills. And when you're ready, compete. Don't wait for people to recognize your value. Show them. Force them to see what they've been missing. And if that means your competition is personal, if that means you're motivated by proving doubters wrong, own it. Use it. Let the anger fuel your ambition, but let the ambition create something valuable. Isn't that just encouraging people to be vindictive? No, it's encouraging people to be strategic. There's a difference between lashing out in anger and using anger as motivation to build something meaningful. I didn't destroy Marcus's career out of spite. I built something better than what he was offering, and clients chose my approach over his. That's competition, not vindictiveness. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, some hostile, some supportive, all engaged with the complexity of what I'd done. By the end, I felt like I'd earned the applause I received, not because everyone agreed with me, but because everyone understood that business ethics wasn't as simple as following rules. It was about navigating complexity with honesty about motivations and commitment to positive outcomes. After the speech, several people approached me. Business students wanting advice, consultants wanting to discuss partnerships, one woman who'd been in a similar situation, underestimated by male colleagues, wanting to know how I'd found the courage to fight back. It wasn't courage, I told her. It was being too tired to keep accepting how I was treated. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just decide you're done being small. Claire was waiting for me outside the conference hall. She'd come to watch the speech, sitting in the back where I wouldn't see her and get nervous. She'd found a teaching position at a good school, was renting a small apartment not far from mine, was rebuilding her life piece by piece. "You're amazing," she said, hugging me. Mom and Dad would have been so proud. They would have been horrified by all the drama. Maybe, but they'd have been proud that you stood up for yourself, that you built something meaningful, that you didn't let anyone make you feel less than you are. We walked together to Aldo's, our place now. The scene of so many difficult conversations somehow transformed into something comfortable. We ordered our usual drinks and sat in our usual corner. "Heard from Marcus?" I asked. "He's doing better. Got a job at a smaller consulting firm. Less prestigious, but more focused on sustainable practices. Ironic, right?" Your revenge forced him to adopt the exact approach he'd dismissed for years. How's he doing otherwise? Sober 6 months, in therapy. Learning to be less of an asshole. Claire smiled. He asked me to coffee last week. Not to get back together, just to apologize properly. To acknowledge that he'd been terrible to both of us in different ways. How'd that go? Surprisingly well. I don't love him anymore. But I don't hate him either. He's just someone I used to be married to who's trying to become someone better. I can respect that. Think he'll succeed? I don't know. But that's his journey, not mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Helena. New client. Major healthcare system. They specifically asked for you. Said they wanted to work with the consultant who proved that business success and social responsibility aren't mutually exclusive. When can you start? I showed Claire the message. She laughed. The revenge that keeps on giving. It's not revenge anymore. It's just work. Good work that helps people and pays my bills. The revenge was just the catalyst that got me here. But you're still known for it, the social worker who took down her brother-in-law's career. That's your brand now. Could be worse. Could be known as the social worker who let people underestimate her for 7 years and never fought back. We talked for another hour about smaller things. Her students, my upcoming projects, the apartment hunting we'd been doing together. I was finally ready to leave my strategic tiny apartment for something that reflected my actual income, instead of my determination to prove I could survive on nothing. As we were leaving, I caught my reflection in the cafe window. I looked different than I had 6 months ago. More confident, more comfortable in my own skin, still professional, still competent, but no longer trying to be smaller than I was to make others comfortable. Marcus had called my career a joke, had said I'd helped myself into poverty, had offered me a job as an office manager because he thought that was the best I could do. He'd been spectacularly wrong. And that wrongness had cost him his job, his marriage, his reputation. But it had also, eventually, forced him to become someone better. Forced Claire to choose her own path. Forced an industry to confront assumptions about what made someone qualified for success. And it had given me the career I'd always deserved, but had been too afraid to claim until someone pushed me too far. The revenge had been sweet while it lasted, but the real victory was in building something that outlasted the anger, that created value beyond proving someone wrong, that helped people while also helping myself. I'd started as the underestimated social worker. I'd become the woman who proved that underestimation was the greatest gift you could give a competitor. Because underestimated people had nothing to lose and everything to gain. They fought harder, thought smarter, competed better than people who'd been comfortable their whole lives. Marcus had taught me that lesson by underestimating me for 3 years. I'd taught him the cost of that mistake over 6 months. And now, standing outside Aldo's cafe with my sister, looking at my phone, showing another opportunity created by the reputation I'd built, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because the revenge had been perfect, but because it had been mine. My choice, my strategy, my victory, earned through skills I'd developed while everyone else was dismissing their value. "You ready to go?" Claire asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready. Ready for the next challenge, the next opportunity, the next chance to prove that choosing to help people had been the smartest career decision I'd ever made, even if no one had believed it at the time, especially because no one had believed it at the time. Because nothing motivated quite like being told you couldn't do something by people who should have known better." Marcus had learned that lesson too late. I'd learned it just in time, and that had made all the difference.